iWorks was a successful internet marketing company that sold several self-help and business opportunity programs on the internet, including a comprehensive grant program that taught people how to apply for and where to apply for the thousands of both government and private grants that are available to individuals.
In 2010, attorneys for the U.S. government, led by Collot Guerard of the Federal Trade Commission, used false affidavits and false evidence obtained through threats and intimidation to shut down a thriving U.S. company, seize and sell all of its assets, along with the personal assets of its owner, the owner's family, and others associated with the company.
As part of their investigation into iWorks, the Federal Trade Commission had asked for documents to prove that all of the testimonials on their websites were legitimate. iWorks had 12 testimonials that were used on their websites. They were able to find files for 11 of those 12 testimonials, and they submitted those to the FTC. Months later, when the Federal Trade Commission filed a lawsuit against iWorks, one of the charges was that they used false testimonials. That charge was completely and solely based around one missing file. Her name was Natasha Lee. The affidavit that Collot Guerard submitted as Natasha Lee's testimony stated that Natasha Lee was a false testimonial and that she had never received a grant. Well, the folks at iWorks put a little more effort into it, and they found Natasha's file. Natasha Lee's file included a really nice thank you letter from Natasha, a copy of her grant award check, and some pictures of her kids.
You know, I'm pretty sure they get 1,000 stories, and I wanted them to know that I was a real person. These are my ultrasounds of my twins. These are my children. Thank you. It was just really thank you. You are really, really helping us. So
Natasha, just like the other 11 happy iWorks customers, was a real testimonial. And all of this was in complete contradiction to the obviously fabricated affidavit that the FTC submitted to the court to make their case against iWorks. Now, these facts were further supported by Natasha Lee's video testimony, in which she states that not only did the FTC officials falsify her affidavit, but they threatened her and her family in an effort to get Natasha to lie to support their case against iWorks.
It's the FTC lawyers, the FTC people, that they come over here and they are quite intimidating. They were going over my testimony with me. They wanted me to say certain things if someone asked me a certain question. And it was like, they ask you this, this is what you say. If they ask you this, this is what you say. And I said, but that didn't happen. I said, I can't say that, that didn't happen. I can't say that, that didn't happen. And it was just like, don't worry about it. You know, it's not really lying, it's kind of stretching the truth. And I just said I wasn't gonna do it. And when you don't wanna do what they want you to do, now it was like, okay, well, you were in the program, we were helping you. Now it's my turn to pretty much earn my keep. And it's like, what do you mean earn my keep? So you want me to lie for you to earn my keep? And I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not gonna do that. And then she was like, all I'm saying is Utah is pretty cold and it would be really horrible for 6 little kids to be in the shelter because their mom doesn't want to cooperate. And I was like, well, if I gotta lie, I'm not willing to do that.
The second witness's affidavit used by the FTC to convince Judge Hunt to allow the government to seize and sell the assets of iWorks and Jeremy Johnson was supposedly the words of Devin Partridge. But once again, Collot Guerard and other FTC agents used threats and coercion to try to force Devin to say things their way.
I was contacted by the FTC. They called me and were intimidating. They told me that they would write the affidavit for me. The testimony that the FTC wrote for me and gave to the judge was not the testimony that I would have written or that I would have given had I been speaking with the judge one-on-one. I told them a lot of things that I wasn't happy with, that I thought they used verbiage that wasn't correct, words like scam and fraud, and that's a big deal because using a different word instead of saying, you know, product, saying scam, that makes a big difference in how the judge reads my affidavit, obviously.
So not only did they threaten Devin, but when Devin caught the lies and manipulations in the affidavit that the FTC had written, they still didn't correct the affidavit.
They sent me the affidavit later, and I signed it without reading through it again, assuming that the changes that I had told them were made. There are a series of statements throughout that initial testimony that were exaggerated beyond what was true. So later on I decided to sign another affidavit saying that my initial one was incorrect and false. I only signed the affidavit because of improper intimidations and threats from Collot Guerard and other attorneys at the Federal Trade Commission.
Now here's the important part. These false affidavits from Natasha Lee and Devin Partridge were the key pieces of evidence submitted by Collot Guerard of the Federal Trade Commission to Federal Judge Roger Hunt to convince him to allow the Federal Trade Commission to seize and sell the assets of iWorks and Jeremy Johnson without a trial or due process guaranteed by the Constitution. The iWorks defense team is in possession of at least 11 additional affidavits signed by people who have also been threatened by Collot Guerard or other attorneys at the Federal Trade Commission, in an effort to force them to bear false testimony to support the government's case against iWorks.
I took Devin's affidavit and I sent it to Julie Brill. She's a commissioner with the Federal Trade Commission. I also sent it to John Leibowitz. He's the chairman of the Federal Trade Commission. And I also sent it to a woman named Cynthia Hogue. And she's the Inspector General or the internal police of the FTC. And it's her job to make sure that the FTC staff are not abusing their powers. I didn't hear anything from Julie Brill or from John Leibowitz, but Cynthia Hogue called me. She was deeply concerned, and she said that she was going to open an investigation. I hadn't heard from Cynthia, so I followed up with her to see how the investigation was going, and she told me that she had contacted Collot Guerard. Collot Guerad's a prosecutor who's threatened Devin and Natasha to give these false statements. And Collot told her that she didn't do anything wrong. And Cynthia Hogue decided based on that, she wasn't going to open an investigation after all. I was surprised that Cindy wouldn't open an investigation, especially since she had an affidavit from Devin swearing under penalty of perjury that Collot Guerard had threatened him. So I kept calling Cynthia wanting answers as to why she wouldn't open an investigation. I was especially disturbed that she never even called Devin to verify any of this. And she just decided she wasn't going to investigate. Finally, Cynthia's assistant returned my calls.
Is it illegal for a Federal Trade Commission attorney to threaten a witness to give false testimony?
I don't know the answer to that.
You really are telling me I'm not answering that?
Well, I've given you all the information that I can give you at this point. Okay?
You understand how frustrating that is to someone who's trying to get justice.
I feel for you, and I think we've done everything that we can do here.
But you don't see any problem with the government attorney threatening a witness to give false testimony?
No.
Wow.
So I'm going to end this call.
I was actually shocked that the Federal Trade Commission doesn't see anything wrong with falsifying evidence that they present to a judge to use against defendants that they bring actions against. And I actually called the FBI right next door to the FTC to see what they thought.
Good morning, FBI. I don't know how the witness tampering laws work. I looked at it on the internet, and it seems like if you're doing anything to alter the testimony of a witness, it's a crime. Does that apply to everyone? I mean, witness tampering is illegal no matter who it is, whether it's attorney or whatever. What if it's a government attorney?
It's still illegal, sir. Witness tampering is illegal. No one's above the law. But no matter who it is, no one is allowed to break the law.
I'd hoped that Julie Brill and the other commissioners, when they learned about this falsified evidence and false testimony, would do the right thing and put a prosecutor on this case that was going to obey the law. And unfortunately, they didn't do that. Instead, Julie went on national television and she bragged about the massive advantage that they now have in this case because they were able to convince a judge with the false evidence to freeze my assets and make sure I wouldn't have an attorney.
Well, I am really happy to report we definitely got the out in this case. A federal judge has entered a preliminary injunction against Johnson's operation, shutting it down, appointing a receiver, and freezing Johnson's assets. Our staff was really fabulous on this case.
In this case, really fabulous means witness tampering, lying to a federal judge, falsifying evidence, unlawful seizure of property, denial of right to an attorney, denial of trial by jury, basically a systematic violation of constitutional rights.
False testimony from these government witnesses, along with other falsified evidence, was submitted in court to convince U.S. District Judge Roger Hunt to allow the Federal Trade Commission to seize and sell the assets of Jeremy Johnson. The gravity of these false statements was so great that the judge denied Johnson access to his own money for any living expenses, or to even hire an attorney for his own defense.
You might be asking yourself, why would a government prosecutor be willing to take such risks, breaking the law? Well, when was the last time you heard of a government prosecutor admitting that they'd made a mistake? Exactly. It takes a lot to convince a federal judge like Judge Hunt to allow a government agency to take away someone's property, the things they've worked all their lives for, and then sell them without even a trial or any kind of admission of wrongdoing. Well, it's not Collot Guerard's first rodeo. She knows from experience that the best way to keep anyone from finding out about her crimes was to make certain that the case never goes to trial. And the best way to do that is to take everything away from the defendant, leave them penniless and unable to afford an attorney to protect themselves. You see, these are civil cases, not criminal cases. If you can't afford a lawyer in a civil case, well, you're just out of luck. That's how prosecutors like Collot Guerard make sure that you sign their settlement agreements and that their bad deeds are never exposed in front of a judge or a jury. If Collot Guerard was caught speeding in your city, she'd likely be pulled over and given a citation for speeding. If she were driving under the influence of alcohol, she'd most likely get arrested and incarcerated for driving while intoxicated. I think that as citizens of the United States, we expect our elected officials and employees of the government to be held to at least the same standard as the rest of us. Well, we've just presented some pretty clear evidence that Collot Guerard is guilty of at least 2 counts of witness tampering. So if any of you watching are in law enforcement, well, she went that away.